Okay, once again, I'm in rural Devon with Matt Mantle, as I've been told Matt it is. Previously Matthew, when we were talking. It's been 8 months since we did the last clip, and considering that Matt was probably unknown to most people at that time, it was a very successful, very popular video, and by popular demand, we've been asked to do a part 2, maybe see if Matt can elaborate on some of the things he talked about previously. Just to recap, Matt bets in running from home on satellite pictures from rural Devon and makes it pay to the extent that he pays the premium charge. Thanks again, Matt, for agreeing to talk to us. I think it's been 8 months since we last spoke. How's it been going?
Okay, it's probably been quite certainly this summer has been quite tricky. The summer tends to be a harder time of year. I think quite a lot of in-running players find high summer tough. I think firmer grounds, smaller fields, people away on holiday for lack of liquidity and things like that. And I think this year with the kind of drought summer has emphasised all of that, and the World Cup as well. So it's the summer months are always tricky, and they've probably been even trickier this year. But yeah, with the usual ups and downs, it's okay.
I think it's safe to say that when I posted your video last time, the first video, quite a few people were incredulous before they even clicked on, and there was quite a bit of Twitter, that can't happen, blah blah blah. And then I think once they actually saw what you had to say, or heard what you had to say, they were convinced that. But a lot of people sort of say you're a little bit vague, probably understandably, you don't want to give all your secrets away, but can you give us a little bit more information, what you're actually looking for? Can you elaborate on a few things that might happen in a race that other people might not take much notice of, that you sort of think is critical to that race?
Well, I think just about everything is important in a race. I tend to have a picture before a race of what I expect to happen. This one will lead, these one will maybe chase the leaders, those will be held up, ones that might travel easily, ones that might race too freely, ones that might need riding along, and then you're I think that's the beauty of punting in running, is that as soon as the stalls open or the tapes go up, everything changes. It's almost like a different thing to bet on. So you have a picture, this is what people are expecting pre-race, and certainly that forms the basis of maybe what I'm thinking about doing. But then as soon as the race is off, then that can go out of the window. So if something that normally travels well isn't travelling well, something that's needed scrubbing along is travelling more kindly, something that's pulling that hasn't, all these things change the dynamic. And there are so many, racing is not mathematical to working out what horse is going to win. There's no definitive answer, but there are lots of tiny little pieces. The quality of the horses involved, the weights, the going, the pace, the draw, all kinds of things that make up what will happen at the end. And you can only assess so many of those pre-race. And once the race starts, you in some ways you're starting from scratch. So I guess what I'm looking for in the early stages is anything that differs from kind of my pre-race vision, if you like, of how the race will go, and then you work from there. And then of course you've got to make very quick choices as to what these things that you weren't expecting to see, what they mean. Do they increase a horse's chances? Do they decrease them?
So you mentioned that you've got an idea of how a race is going to pan out. You must put a fair bit of prep in then to try and work out each race prior to betting on it.
To an extent, yes, but you have a fair knowledge of a large number of horses, their running styles and things like that. So it's really a question of putting that together in a particular race. You might have a lot of front runners, you might have no pace, things like that. And that gives you, as I say, I start off with a rough picture of what I'm expecting from a race, and then alter my position depending on how things pan out once the race actually starts.
Can you be a little bit more specific? I mean, people might say, well, that's all very well, but you're not really telling us much. Can you tell us something that you might see in the early stages of a race which makes you think that can't win, that others might miss?
Well, there are a lot of things. I think a little knowledge can be dangerous in this type of thing. I think most people who watch any racing would have an idea of what are good signs, what are bad signs. If a jockey isn't doing a lot, a horse is travelling easily, that's a good sign. If it's having its head scrubbed off, that's a bad sign. But there are many subtleties within that. And I guess getting down to fine tuning, that maybe is an area in which I have an advantage, is in understanding, having watched different jockeys to use a couple of famous people for libel reasons who have retired. Richard Hughes and Kieran Fallon would have very different riding styles. One of them much more quiet, would get horses to travel for him. One who always seemed to be chivying along, asking horses to go quicker than they wanted to be. It's a question to a large extent of riding styles. So Richard Hughes sat there motionless, Kieran Fallon just nursing one along, could mean a very similar thing in terms of what a horse has got to give, but would give a very different appearance to somebody just watching the race.
Okay, now we'll go on to this, the jockeys. I mean, do you take notice of horses that have drifted alarmingly before a race? And are there, watching as many races that you do, are there any jockeys riding a horse that might have been an alarming drifter that does something that you might think, doesn't look too busy today?
You can have things like that in the back of your head. I try not to get too tied to them, because you don't know unless you're involved. You might have a horse that has drifted alarmingly, is a prominent racer, drawn 1 at Chester, and then is slowly away, and you think, well, what a surprise, the market knew that was coming. But equally, somebody in my position would be very foolish to think that's obviously what's going to happen, assume that's going to happen, and then it pings, gets the rail, and is a fifth of the price it was. And so I tend to rely on what I see. I would have the market in the back of my head, and with debutant maybe who seems weak in the market, it might suggest that it's going to be given maybe an educational ride, or today's not the day. You'd have things like that in your head, but I wouldn't get too tied to them as an idea. Drifters, as the forum will tell you, do occasionally win.
I know it's obviously a rare occurrence, and we all know that racing pretty much is straight, but occasionally you do see a horse there's fortunes to lay almost as soon as it comes out the stalls or jumps off. Would you take special notice of that, or has that come into your previous answer?
I think probably it comes under the previous answer. Your natural inclination, if you see a large amount, to lay one in running, what do they know that I don't? But I think it would be foolish for somebody just to go on that kind of information. I pretty well go on what I see. It's out there. To extrapolate that out, that there are some famous in-running carnage ones where commentators have called the wrong horse and people have laid huge prices. Well, if whoever's laying is just going on their own eyes rather than what they're being told, then that doesn't happen. And so I might have the market and things like that in my head, or what other people have put up as lay bets. But I just tend to focus on what I'm thinking about and what I want to do.
Okay, one of the questions I didn't ask you, which is one of the basics people ask about, what system do you use, what interface do you use, and why?
I use Gruss. I use it. I was an absolute dinosaur for a lot of years. When I started doing this, I kind of was self-taught in terms of the Betfair side of things, and I was tapping away with fingers and thumbs and entering bets manually. And I did that even when I was full-time. I still did that for several years until I spent a day with somebody whose opinion I respected, who said, please just give this a try. And I did, and then of course very quickly realised, why didn't I do this years ago? So Gruss makes my life a lot easier. There are many things within it that I simply don't use because I'm not very technologically minded, but just having everything in custom boxes at one click away. Fill or kill is something that's very useful to me. You set a time limit for a bet and you submit it. And then if it's not taken within a certain period of time, then it's taken out of the system. That in my old fingers and thumbs days, I would leave a price in there and they thought, well, I don't want to lay it now. And of course it's too late, the price is gone by then. So things like that, the one click side of it, the custom boxes, the fill or kill, it definitely helps me a lot. It's frankly incredible value. It's about £6 a month and it's worth a lot more than that to me.